Chapter 7, May 5th, 2021. Awakening. I tried to place the sound next to my bed, but didn't look. Gabriella was sitting in a chair doing something, and I wanted to guess what it was. It came to me. She was reading a magazine because the pages rustled noisily. Gabriella treats books like sacred relics, which they are, and never abused a page, no matter how much she disliked the book. Magazines were another matter. I kept my eyes closed, savoring her being next to me. I held the moment, even as it faded away. I begged it to return, but it refused. Still, I kept my eyes shut as I turned my head towards the sound. Reluctantly, I opened them. Shifting them to the window, I saw a craggy face with light blue eyes staring at me over the magazine. Those eyes somehow conveyed the truth I'd been fighting with my entire being since I'd awakened that morning. Gabriella was gone, just as the doctors told me, over and over and over. Larry made it real with just his eyes, and I hated him for it. I looked away, and he went back to reading. The next time I looked at him, he offered me a glass of water. I realized that I was propped up on pillows and thirsty. I blinked, and he held the glass to my mouth. When I bent my head to drink, I saw a shoulder holster in his tailored gray suit. I took a sip, and he patted my mouth with a small towel. I stared up at him. Then he held a badge in front of my face. "Mr. Harding, my name is Larry Burns. I'm a U.S. Deputy Marshal. I'm assigned to protect you under the WITSEC program." He paused, trying to gauge what was sinking in. "Mr. Harding, you are in the Federal Witness Protection Program. Do you remember that?" Staring into my eyes, he frowned and straightened. "Excuse me for a second." My eyes followed him to the door. He poked his head out the door and said something. Another man, bald and older, in a wrinkled dark suit with a gun on his waist, stepped into the room. They talked too softly for me to hear. The bald man left, shutting the door firmly behind him. Larry walked back to his chair by the bed and sat. "Sorry, Mr. Harding, I needed to make sure we have a little privacy. I'm sorry about your wife. I really am. I wish we had time for you to deal with it, but we don't, and there are things I need to tell you. Do you understand? They said you can talk now. Can you?" With an effort, I croaked, "Yes." He frowned softly and said, "It sounds tough for you. Look, for now, all you need to do is answer some yes and no questions. You can just nod yes or shake for no. Understand?" I tried to nod and felt nothing, but Larry saw something because he gave me an approving smile. He took a deep breath, let it out, and asked, "That's good. Do you remember what you and your wife were doing in that parking lot? Don't tell me, just nod if you remember." I had no idea what he was talking about and shook my head. He held up a hand when I opened my mouth to ask what was happening. "Mr. Harding, you have to trust me on this. Remember, it's too hard for you to talk. Understand? It's too hard for you to talk." I understood the words, not the why. Tried to push myself up and failed. Larry bent over me, and his eyes told me to remember what he told me. I hated him, and yet, for some reason, I trusted those eyes. "Mr. Harding, I have to show you something. It will be hard, and I wish we could wait and give you more time, but we don't have time, and you have to watch for your sake. Can you do that? Mr. Harding, your life depends on you following my instructions. Can you do that?" For some reason, every part of me screamed no. I opened my mouth. His eyes narrowed. I shut my mouth and reluctantly nodded. He carefully placed a pillow on my lap, put a computer tablet on it, and arranged it until I nodded that I could see it. He gently put my finger on the play button and looked at me. I nodded, and he pushed my finger down. The video showed a man also propped up by pillows in a bed. His head was wrapped entirely in bandages with only his eyes showing. The eyes were wide with pain and fear. A voice said, "Mr. Harding, once again, your wife is dead, sir. I'm sorry, but we need to ask you more questions." "Yes, doctor, I know, but this is important. Jeff, escort everyone out of the room for a moment." There was the sound of arguing and a door slamming shut. The voice came back, rushed and harsh. "Mr. Harding, we don't have much time. You're being taken to surgery. I'm sorry, but I have to ask you these questions one more time for the record. Earlier today, when you regained consciousness, you said you saw a man in a restaurant in Queens. Is this the man you saw?" I watched the bandaged face, my face, give a slight nod. Something was said too garbled to make out. The voice snapped. Yeah, one more goddamn second. It's Dragna. Mr. Harding, you said the man who shot you and your wife was sitting with this Dragna. Is this the man who shot you? I watched myself try to sit up as a hand gently pushed me back onto the pillow. Then the video focused on my face. My mouth strained against the bandages, and blood dripped from gauze on the left side of my face. Mr. Harding, it's okay. It's okay. Just settle down for a moment. I need you to nod if this is the guy who shot you. Just nod if it's him. My head pushed up and down violently. Tears flowed from my eyes onto the bandages, turning the gauze into pink tie-dye. Something came loose, and I howled with pain and fell back onto the pillow, blood shooting through the ripped and tear-soaked gauze. The witness has identified Craig Nicky. Yeah, we're done. Damn it, we're done. The next voice was Larry's, and the video panned out, showing him leaning over me. Mr. Harding, I'm the U.S. Deputy Marshal with Witness Protection. We met earlier today. Mr. Harding, if you press your thumb here, you'll be in witness protection as we promised. We talked about this. Here, let me help you. Propped up on my pillows, I watched as the video memorialized Deputy Burns, helping the bandaged version of myself sit up. Confused, I saw him leaning over me just like in the video. Our eyes met. He hit the pause button. Okay, that's weird. Here, I'll sit down, he said, and lifted my hand back to the screen, placing my forefinger on the play button. Can you handle that? He asked. I reached deep and tapped the button. Larry took his seat. His eyes went to the door and mine to the screen. The screen showed him still standing over me. I glanced over to make sure he was still seated. He was. Relieved, I hit replay with slightly less effort than before. After my third viewing, Larry rose from his chair and gently took it away from me. Drained and exhausted, I closed my eyes. I forced them open when I heard a sound. The wrinkled suit man stood in the doorway. He said in a low, gravelly voice, "He's here." Stepping back out, he quietly shut the door behind him. Larry said, "Mr. Harding, we're out of time. A doctor is coming to see you, a surgeon, the one who operated on you. All I'm asking is that you take some time before answering his questions. I'm not telling you to lie or anything like that, but please take some time." He coughed and looked out the window at a blue sky, trying to decide how to say something. My eyes, twisted to the side to watch him, began to tire. Outside the door, voices were raised. Larry looked down at me and made up his mind. "Everyone tells me he saved your life. He had brought you to this place during the start of the pandemic." Yeah, pandemic. Seeing the confusion in my eyes, he shook his head and said, "That's for another day. Anyway, you are in a place that costs more in one day than I make in a year, and no one's ever heard of it. Okay, no one in the Marshal's Service anyway. You've been here for over 14 months, in fact." The voices outside the door grew louder. He glanced at the door and then back to me. "But for what it's worth, brother, I wouldn't trust this little bastard as far as I can kick him. There's something weird going on, so watch your ass. Don't tell him anything. Don't tell him what you remember or that you don't remember. Not yet. Just wait until your head clears and you and I talk, okay?" It wasn't, but those eyes made me instinctively nod. The noise outside grew. Larry abruptly sat down and picked up his magazine. A second later, the door opened, and a trim man with short, dark hair, a carefully stubbled chin, and the perfect healthy tan stepped into the room. The white coat that gave him away as a doctor was too big for him, and he fumbled with the long sleeves before looking up. He lifted his chin and glared at Larry, who lowered his paper and smiled back. "Mr. Wobble, nice to see you again. Have a nice flight? It's Dr. Weeble. I need to talk to my patient. Please leave," the doctor said in a high-pitched, cultured voice born to command. Larry looked over at me, and I tried to shake my head. Even at that moment, with my world shattered and nothing making sense, Dr. Weeble sent chills through me. I would have felt it if Larry never said a word, and it was much more than a grown man looking like a spoiled brat playing doctor in an oversized smock. Later, when my conscious and unconscious were back on speaking terms, I realized it was Weeble's eyes. They were normal blue eyes, always perfectly tuned to the tone in his voice. Voice serious, eyes somber. Voice joking, eyes light up, concerned, eyes close to tears. Later, I saw those eyes in the reflection of a window when he looked away from me. The tone of voice stayed perfectly in tune with our conversation, but the eyes instantly faded into lifelessness, as if put into an instant sleep mode to conserve energy. But the first time I met him, it was probably mainly Larry that caused the hairs on the back of my neck to rise. There was no mistaking how he viewed the doctor. When the doctor told Larry, in an imperious tone, to leave the room, Larry gave me an almost imperceptible nod and put himself between the doctor and me. "Sorry, Doc, no can do. He's under my protection." The doctor craned his thin neck upward and spat. "I'm his doctor. You're his surgeon, or you were anyway. And how do I know it's even you?" "You know me, damn it!" the surgeon replied, his voice shedding some of its culture. Larry shook his head regretfully and said, "I think I remember you. Sorry, brother. Honestly, all of you guys kind of look alike. I was in an office full of you just yesterday in a building across the street from the exchange. Of course, they all wore gray suits instead of lab coats." The two men stared at one another in silence, which suited Larry better than Dr. Weeble. Dr. Weeble gritted his teeth and said, "You know me, deputy." Larry frowned cheerfully and said, "I know Dr. Wobble. Your coat says Dr. Jensen, and I know you're not Dr. Jensen. He's a nice guy, much older and," Larry paused, "taller." "I'm Dr. Weeble." "Whatever," Larry grinned, and then his voice hardened. "Dr. Weeble, or whoever you are, I need to see some identification, please." Dr. Weeble's mouth opened, but nothing came out. It closed, and he tried again but failed to find the words. He started to take off Dr. Jensen's coat, then stopped when Larry pulled his jacket back and put his hand on the butt of his weapon. "Go ahead, doctor. Remove the coat." "Slowly," Larry growled, giving his version of bedside manner. The man in the wrinkled suit stepped close behind the doctor, almost touching him. Dr. Weeble disdainfully let the coat fall to the floor. His eyes narrowed with menace and were precisely in tune with a jaw clenched in outrage. But his trembling knees gave him away. He slowly reached into his back pocket, and Larry loosened his weapon. The doctor froze. He jumped when the man behind him, who I would later learn was Bob, spoke into his ear. "Go ahead. Just do it slowly." The doctor's hand came back empty, and suddenly he was angry. He turned to face Bob, but Larry stepped close, trapping him. Dr. Weeble's voice lost its culture. Pointing at Bob, he said, "He could see my hand. He's right behind me. He knew that I didn't have anything in my back pocket. What kind of game are you playing here?" Larry, nonplussed, shook his head. "You'd be amazed at what we've seen pulled out of asses. Where is your identification?" "I left my wallet in my coat." "And where is your coat?" The doctor looked at Larry with hatred unfitting to a man sworn to do no harm, and replied, "Dr. Jensen's office." Larry smiled and waved a hand in apology. "Oh, I get it. You just grabbed the wrong white coat. Left your white coat in Dr. Jensen's office." Dr. Weeble, seeing respect about to be restored, squared his shoulders and replied, "That's exactly what happened. Satisfied, deputy?" "No problem. Bob, would you escort whoever this is back to Dr. Jensen's? Be careful, he seems a little unstable." "Me? I'd notice putting on a coat 2 sizes too large, but that's just me. Doctors have more on their minds." Bob stepped around the doctor and motioned for the doctor to take the lead. As Dr. Weeble turned to go, Larry reached out a long arm and rested a hand gently on the doctor's shoulder. Looking down at the doctor, Larry said, "One more thing. When you give Dr. Jensen his coat, please get yours from him, assuming he is wearing it. If he isn't, it will still be in his office. Bob, we need to make sure the doctor finds his white coat. He says he accidentally grabbed Dr. Jensen's. We need to find that coat to clear all of this up. I want to know if this man lied to a federal agent." Dr. Weeble's eyes narrowed, and I saw a glint of fear for the first time. Larry leaned in closer, his face only inches from the doctor's. One more thing. Based on what happened today, I am ordering you to stay away from my witness unless you get my permission. Do you understand? Don't look at me like that. I can not only do it, but if I catch you ignoring this order, I can and will arrest you. Trust me, prisons are still not a good place to spend even one night. They say there are COVID variations in there that the vaccines don't stop. Do you understand me?" To his credit, the doctor didn't flinch. He started to speak, didn't like his voice, swallowed and tried again. I understand completely, Deputy. This isn't over. You have made a horrible mistake. He walked out with his chin up, and Bob shut the door behind him. Larry chuckled. Okay, I've only heard that about 1,000,000 fucking times. Never from a neurosurgeon before. Well, not counting a guy who turned out to be a veterinarian. Those guys used to sew up mob guys until they found out how much more they could make cleaning a dog's teeth. I had this girlfriend who, never mind. Larry walked over and sat down. Need any more water? No? Okay, look, the little prick saved your life. Probably has saved hundreds. They say he's one of the best neurosurgeons in the world. You're alive and talking, brother, so I believe it. But that little shit gives me the creeps every time I see him. And this place, he waved a hand, is unbelievable and officially legit. He paused, gave me a wry grin and said, Dr. Jensen is the guy who takes care of you daily. For some reason, I don't think the two of them get along. But you're in this weird HIPAA limbo, so it's hard to get any real answers from Jensen. I get the feeling that he's not too sure what's even up with you. We can go over it all later. My job is to protect you so you can testify against Ernest Dragna and Craig Nicky. He absently picked up the magazine from the seat. For a moment, I thought he was going to begin reading again. Then he put it aside and studied me. The doctors told me you wanted to talk to your wife when you woke up. They don't know anything about you. You didn't remember that your wife was killed when you woke up. Do you remember anything now? No, I rasped. He pulled his head back, surprised at my quick reply. You sure you don't remember? I shut my eyes and croaked out each word. Gabriella, not dead. I would remember. I would know. Larry spoke in a soft voice. Can I ask you this? What is the last thing you remember doing with Gabriella before waking up? Don't think, just tell me. Dinner. Chinese, I instantly replied. None of the rest was any of his damn business. My memory was almost photographic. Like always, Gabriella had picked her favorite, Peking duck. I ate my usual and started on hers. Pulling back my hand, I rubbed it. She didn't break the skin with her fork, but there would already be a bruise on my hand if I checked, which I didn't. I had said, Damn it, Gabriella, why do you do that? You're not even going to eat half of it. I don't want you too full, she replied softly. Since when would that stop me? She'd pouted her lips, rolled her eyes, and said, Oui. And then after 1 minute, okay, maybe 2, you fall asleep. You know, never mind. Eat as much as you want. Get fat. You can have all of it. She leaned forward to push her plate at me, and I saw her unrestrained breasts, the nipples hard against the soft fabric of her open blouse. A strand of long black hair fell in front of her eyes, and she looked into mine as she brushed it contemptuously back with her little finger. Then, with the dancer's grace and the arrogance of the French, she strode to the bedroom. I took a big bite and chewed slowly. She needed to know that she didn't have my number. I finished swallowing just as I reached the bedroom door. I remembered, with aching clarity, her arching her back and pulling me into her. I remembered her long hair falling softly onto my face as she gazed into my eyes. I remembered her telling me what she wanted in a language I never understood. Later, we ate breakfast in a small restaurant down the street just before sunrise. Arguing, I insisted that I had never fallen asleep, even for a minute, and she mimicked my snores. The old waiter, a breed now only found in New York City, patted my shoulder after taking my order. I opened my eyes. When? Larry snapped. Hesitating a heartbeat, I replied, Last night. He stood up abruptly and looked out the window, at what I would later learn were acres of immaculately maintained grounds. I watched his reflection in the window. The callous gaze he aimed at me a moment before was gone, and his face was filled with a terrible sadness. I looked down at my hand for the bruise I knew was no longer there, and looked back to his reflection. Where? I croaked. He stiffened but continued to look out the window. Where is she? I asked, each word a breath. His shoulders slumped slightly. Quickly, he squared them and turned to face me. Her parents came over and took her remains back to France. I'm sorry. When? Over a year ago, I looked away and saw myself in a mirror on the wall across from the foot of the bed. I sucked in my breath as my hand jerked in spasms to my face. Confused, I realized that the gasps of pain were mine, which made no sense. I could barely feel my hand on my face. The scars were hard under my fingertips. My beautiful Gabriella was now married to that. Then I remembered. My tears glistened in the afternoon sun as they flowed smoothly down one side of my face, while on the other side they dropped into twisted canyons before reappearing like miniature waterfalls along my jawline.